there's a trust, and that is the most important thing that you need between a coach or a trainer and a fighter. Safety and well-being. That's what they're trusting me with. They're saying to me that I trust you to get me into this fight and out of it safely.
Eugene Bareman is one of the founders of City Kickboxing Gym, now regarded as one of the best MMA gyms in the world, and he is the head coach of UFC superstar Israel Adesanya. Eugene Bareman, Indigenous 100.
Eugene, kia ora.
Kia ora.
Thank you very much for coming on Indigenous 100. Really appreciate you coming on the program. There's a lot I want to talk to you about, right?
Yep.
But we'll just do it chunk by chunk and see how we go, okay?
Okay.
But let's start with you, though, because I find you a fascinating person, and I think you've got a fascinating story. For a guy that's brought up in the west of Auckland.
Yeah.
Went to Massey High, I think it was.
Just down the road, yeah.
Just down the road. Tell us about your family. Tell us about your mum and dad.
I mean, my family's great. Like, I was lucky enough, or I had a great family upbringing. I didn't come from a broken family or any sort of problematic family. I came from a wonderful family where my mum and dad provided everything that I needed in terms of support, finance, opportunities. They gave me a great work ethic as I was growing up. My dad was a real provider, so he made sure that we had options and that there was everything was there for us to sustain a good, healthy living. So I owe a lot to my parents and their work ethic and what they were able to provide me. So I came from a wonderful family. I have 2 brothers and a sister. I'm the oldest, and then I had a cousin who lived with us almost for a very long time, who's pretty much like a sister. So a good family unit.
Dutch and Samoan extraction, is that right?
Yeah, so my dad's Dutch, and then my mum's provides the Samoan half of me. So bit of a funny mix, but that's New Zealand, right? It's a bit of a melting pot. So.
Yeah.
Those 2 sets of grandparents found themselves in New Zealand, and then it is what it is. My dad and my mum, and then they obviously met, and then produced me and my siblings.
What would your mum and dad, how would they have described you as a child? What were you like?
I feel I was pretty quiet sort of a kid.
You're still quiet now too, to a certain degree.
Yeah, I was very comfortable being by myself and doing things by myself, and I was very comfortable staying at home and not having to go out and socialise or stay at friends' houses overnight. I was a kid that was just very comfortable staying at home and chilling around the home and just being by myself.
Why was that, do you reckon?
I'm not sure. I can't really. That's a good question. I've never really thought of it, but I have children myself. I have 4, and I see a lot of myself in my oldest child, who's very comfortable just being by himself. He doesn't always have to be with his friends. But then I have my second oldest son is the flip side of that, who loves socializing and always wants to be at his friends' houses and has always got his friends coming over. And then my other son's very quiet, barely goes over to a friend's house, barely has a friend over, and is just very comfortable chilling around the home. I'm not sure why that is. I've never really thought about it. You're kind of the first person to bring that up, if you like.
Because I'm trying to relate this to what you currently do, right? And I guess to a certain degree that's also, for some really successful sports people, that ability to be able to be by yourself, to kind of shut away the world and all the pressures that come with international sport is really important. Do you think that's one of the reasons, perhaps, why you're so successful at what you do?
I mean, there's quite possibly a strong connection to why I've been pretty good at this sport and bringing people up through the sport. I definitely felt more comfortable training by myself than I did in a team environment. I was the kind of guy that would get up at 5 a.m. and sprint up a hill behind the zoo or up at Bullock Track. I would feel very comfortable doing that myself, more comfortable than grabbing 5 or 6 people or more people in a rugby type environment or setting. I was definitely a person that liked to put my head down and work by myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're a rugby player, right? When you were.
I grew up in a rugby family. My dad's a really.
I can tell by the ears, by the way.
Yeah, the ears didn't come from rugby. The ears came from fighting. So
all right.
There's one thing fighters have in common with rugby players is we get our ears rubbed a lot, so you get cauliflower ears. But I came from a big rugby family. So I don't know. I just at some point in my life I gravitated towards more of an individual sport, and I seem to enjoy that more. So.
Because when you were doing the running and stuff, and doing it on your own, what are you thinking at the time? What's your thought process going into something like that? Because I find that kind of interesting for young kids, being able to do that on your own.
Well, I tell you what, it definitely had a lot to do with whatever I put in is what I got out.
Wow.
And so, in a team setting, what you put in isn't necessarily what you get out, because the rest of your team has to be matching your work ethic, and if they're not, then you're not necessarily getting out what you put in the team environment. So I think that has a lot to do with why I gravitated towards such a sport where and such an individual sport where you're almost, when it comes to at least in the ring, you're completely relying on yourself to pull the trigger and make things happen.
And this is quite interesting for me because I'm the complete opposite, right? I'm an extrovert and also not a great fighter. Yeah. But when did you learn that lesson about what you put in, you get out? When did you learn that lesson and how did you learn it? Because it's something you've held on to, right? It's something that's kind of guided you a little bit throughout your career.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to pinpoint any one particular moment, but definitely I remember, playing rugby games, and I was a typical guy. I played rugby from when I could walk and hold a ball, went through first 15 captain, all of that. There's definitely were situations where I remember playing a game and having a very good game and playing to the best of my ability and still not being able to get the result and being really frustrated with that. And it's not something you bring up because that's not how you operate in a team environment. You don't pass blame. It's like, well, I'm never going to be like, come on guys, I played well. How come you guys didn't play as well as me? And we all got the result together. But nevertheless, it's still in your head. Sometimes it leaves you frustrated. You're like, man, sometimes the result is out of my control. I can play the best that I can, but if the other 10 guys or other 14 guys are not up to scratch, not reaching the same level as commitment as me during the 80 minutes that I'm playing, then it's hard for me to get the result I want. I definitely remember finishing games, and that was a clear, distinct thought in my head, post-match when I was thinking about it. So, maybe rugby had a lot to do with it. Yeah.
Wow. That's ironic, right? Because of what you do now. Yeah. Because ultimately, the results now are achieved by others that you train in the ring, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of ironic Do you know what I mean? That you've kind of got that thinking at that age, and yet what you do now is about really ultimately those results are in the hands, literally in the hands of other people who go in the ring.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what's also ironic is that, I gravitated towards an individual sport, but in many senses, fighting is not an individual sport.
Yeah.
Like, it's actually one of the biggest team sports I've ever participated in, if not more of a team sport than rugby. The difference being is that you're the only one that enters the ring or the cage, and you have to perform on that night. You're solely responsible for the physical performance at that particular time. So there's no one fighting with you. You're not fighting in pairs. It's solely reliant on you. But all the layers underneath that, and what gets you to that cage is like one of the, is your coaches, your partners, your physiotherapists, your massage therapist, your chiropractor. Like there's so many layers to the team. They all get you to that event. A lot of guys now use sports psychologists. Like it's just a huge
Nutritionists,
dietitians, you name it. Like it's just a massive team of people that come together to get those guys into that cage to perform optimally. And then after we do all our job, then it's up to them to do their job. And if they do their job well, that's all on them. They're not reliant. There's no one else competing with them in the cage. So it's you can see their. It's an individual sport, but you can also see that there's a real big team element to it.
And of course, you went in as a fighter. You're still a fighter now. I think you're still a fighter now. Although I think 40-something fights, and you want to get to 50 is what I've heard. But
I did 48. I'm trying to get to 50.
Yeah, that's
I
right.
Still, even when you were talking now, like I'm still very not completely comfortable with being labelled as a coach.
Why is that?
Well, I started this journey to be a fighter. Like I never started it to be a coach. For me, the pinnacle of everything I did was as a fighter. I never dreamt to be the greatest coach in the world, or I never dreamt to be a coach at all. I wanted to be a fighter, and I was fascinated with being a fighter. I was fascinated with the sport, and it's just been such a big part of my life for basically all of my adult life. And it's something I also hold in high esteem. And it kind of like seems like when I start to get labelled a coach that I'm losing that other label that I work so hard for and hold in such high regard. And that's why when we start talking about it, it makes me feel a little uncomfortable.
I find that utterly amazing because you're one of the world's best coaches. You are one of the best in the world at what you do.
Yeah.
That's why I find it really interesting that you still, that it doesn't sit comfortably with you, because there's probably 1,000 other coaches out there, not just in MMA by the way, right, across the world in sport, who are sitting there going, look at this guy, he's one of the world's best coaches that doesn't even really want to be a coach, he wants to be a fighter.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe because I still think I'm young, like I only just turned 40, so and I know physically and mentally I'm in pretty good stead. Like I can still probably compete with some of the young bucks. Things might change like in 10 years when I'm 50, but at the moment I still feel really able-bodied and mentally, there in the right place where I can still compete at a good level. So maybe that's got something to do with it, but. Yeah, like I said, I worked hard and held that title of being a fighter in high regard, so to let that go and perhaps take on another title doesn't sit well with me quite yet. I haven't got used to it.
And so you're still training to be a fighter as well as training other fighters now or less?
I've been training a lot less. Like my schedule just hasn't allowed me to do the training. And I say that. I say that I say that reluctantly because it's a little bit of an excuse. Because
Why is
well, because it doesn't matter what. Everybody has busy schedules. Like we all have busy schedules. You have a busy schedule. I have a busy schedule. But you should always go out of your way to find time for yourself, regardless of your schedule. It's one of the most important things, to your development, for your self-esteem, for your well-being. So I don't like saying that I don't have time. I think if I work hard, if I find it within, if I look hard within my schedule, I can probably find time for myself.
Yeah, but you're a father of 4 now. You're training some of the world's best fighters. You're running one of the world's most successful gyms. You're building a stable of some of the world's best athletes. One can understand how it's pretty difficult to try and find time to train. Do you know what I mean? Do you think you're not being a bit harder on yourself, Eugene?
Nah, not really. You can always, you can always find time. Like I tell you what, like as an example, I'm only a little bit busier than I was a couple of years ago.
All right.
And I had a couple of fights, a couple of years ago. And how I did it was I just worked it. Yeah, I just got off a plane, got straight in the hotel gym. Trained. I went to, I'd go to Europe for 24 hours. I'd be in Europe, and then I'd come back, and I just kept you just make it work. So it can be done. So I probably just have to have a little bit of more will to do it, and stop making excuses, and just find a way to fit it into my schedule.
Talk about your daily schedule with me then.
So it starts at my first class or coaching appointment, if you like, is at 5:15.
So you're up at 4?
At the moment, I want to be there 15 minutes early, so at 4:45. So I'm up around 4:20. Yeah. 10 minutes away from the gym, driving to the gym. 5:15, and that goes till 6:30, and then the next class starts at 6:45. That goes till 8. From 8 o'clock, I take some of my UFC fighters for pads, 8 o'clock. And then at 9 o'clock, I take another fighter for pads. Then at 10, I take the group. We do MMA class. Then at 11, I take another fighter for pads. Then at 12, I take another jiu-jitsu class. Then I get a few hours where I get some of my stuff done. I go home, do some chores. I also attend to the kids who would get home at 3 o'clock. And then I'm back in the gym by like 4:30, 5, taking some more fighters on pads. Couple of classes at night. Get out of there about 8:30 and 9. And then I get home about 10. And then I started all again about 4:20.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't operate on much sleep. So
I'm not with you on you saying.
I normally.
I still think you're being tough on yourself, bro.
I normally get to sleep about 11, and I get up at 4. So I operate on about 4 or 5 hours sleep.
Wow.
But you just learn to do it.
Yeah.
Your body adapts.
I'm struggling with the concept. Okay, I believe you. How did you get into all this? How did you get into fighting?
I segued into fighting because I needed something to do because of one particular year I stopped playing rugby, and truth be told, I stopped playing rugby for the wrong reasons. I didn't get chosen for a team, spat the dummy at the coach and the sport, and said, well, if you guys don't think I'm good enough and I think I'm good enough, then stuff you. And so I went to pursue, other things in life. I felt that I needed some sort of like physical exercise, and then I thought that sport would like give me some of the physicality of rugby, but not be rugby, obviously. So then I walked into a gym, and then I never played rugby again for, you know, so many years. Like it must have been 15 years before I ever stepped foot on a rugby field again. Yeah.
Why MMA though? Did it start off as boxing or?
I started as Thai boxing.
Thai boxing,
which is like closely tied to a little bit more closely tied to MMA than boxing. And then I moved into MMA, but my first inkling of combat sports was MMA. So I knew about MMA. I saw some old videotapes of some old promotions that used to run in Japan, and then I thought, well, I would, you know, I could perhaps have an interest in that, and that's what led me to the Thai boxing or the kickboxing, and then I did that for quite a few years, 4 or 5 years, and then that interest segued into like getting more into the actual MMA stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how I started.
And did you take to it straight away? Even though, you know, first punch, got a bit scared maybe, no, just straight into it, loved it, dunked the water?
I loved it, like, immediately. I was lucky enough to walk into, just randomly, because I chose the gym randomly, quite a renowned gym in New Zealand, and the world actually, with quite a renowned coach, one of the best coaches in New Zealand that we have. His name's Lolo Heimoli. I was lucky enough to walk into his gym and to learn from him and understand the depth of his teachings and how it went, how many layers there were. Like a punch wasn't just a punch. Like he was able to teach it in such a way where you understood all the little intricacies involved in actually landing that punch, and I became really fascinated with that. I wasn't really fascinated with I'm going to punch someone to hurt them. I became really fascinated straight away with all the little technical details to do with fighting and all the little intricacies that people on the outside don't necessarily think about.
Can you give me an example of one, not being kind of well acquainted with it?
Yeah, so for instance, like the way the mechanics work to produce the most power for your punch, how you have to recruit if you're throwing a right hand, you have to recruit the right side of your body, which actually starts at your foot. Your foot, and you turn your foot, which turns your knee, which turns your hip turns the right side of your body connects to your shoulder, through the elbow, and then through to the hand. Like all of these, and then the physics, like how the core's involved and the shoulder muscles are involved, and all these little things that you wouldn't normally associate with just throwing your average punch. He was able to go very deep into understanding it, and I became fascinated with that, and that led me to where I am now, where I just had a thirst for that sort of knowledge and just pursued it.
Because Lolo's also a boxing coach, right? Like he's a trainer and coach of boxing.
Boxing and kickboxing.
Boxing and kickboxing.
Yeah.
Boxing never interested you, given the scientific breakdown and the formula you've just given me. I'm trying to figure out why not say boxing as a study.
Because I felt that boxing doesn't pay enough attention to the lower body. I felt, and in turn, and later on, I felt the same way in regards to MMA and kickboxing. Like kickboxing doesn't have any takedowns, so you don't necessarily go into the art of fighting on the ground. I felt the same way about boxing. Well, boxing doesn't include kicks. What if someone kicks you? So I felt it was just more of a complete martial art, and rather than a sport. And in turn, I found that the same with MMA. It was just more of a complete sport than kickboxing. I think that's why I gravitated towards kickboxing. Also, at the time, he was doing a lot. Like nowadays, he does a lot of boxing training, but back then it was all. Lolo barely used to teach much boxing. It was all kickboxing back in the day. Yeah, so that's why I gravitated towards that.
Sounds to me like you kind of unlock the code pretty early. Like the Matrix, right? You're able to be Neo and see the bullet coming. With boxing, you're able to see the kind of Matrix code and understand it really quickly.
I tell you what I did do very early on in my career when I'd only had a few fights. I became obsessed with making myself better, and I remember going to Lolo and I remember asking him, I say, do you mind if I help corner some of the fighters? If I jump in the corner, hold the bucket and listen and you know, try and get an understanding of what's going on from that perspective. And he was, you know, I was lucky enough for him to allow me to do that. And the reason I wanted to do that, because I thought if I understood it, if I understood that, that would make me a much better fighter. If I understood what's going through the mind of Lola, what he's thinking of and what he does in between that crucial minute that you get in between rounds. The only reason I asked was because I just thought that would make me a better fighter. You know, in hindsight, you know, what I was really doing was making myself a better trainer without even knowing it. Because in the years that I did that, and I did that for many, I gained such valuable, priceless knowledge from him that you could have only got if he kind of, you know, if he gave you the privilege of being in that position. So I was like, very early on, I understood that there was a very scientific, a very deep side to the sport, a very mental side to the sport, and yeah, I've chased that, and I'm still chasing that today.
You don't think you had a natural kind of knack for it though, because again, lots of people go into corners, right? But they don't necessarily end up being where you're at.
I believe I don't have a knack for it. I believe I'm...
Really?
Nah, I think I'm more learned. I think I've learned. I think my trainer, I think Lolo Heimuli, has natural... You know, I believe he has a knack for it.
Tell me why you think Lolo has it and you don't. What's the crucial difference?
He might argue differently. I
suspect he might, just quietly.
Yeah, but because things come to him, they seem like they come to him so easily. Like through my experiences, through fighting under him and having him in my corner, he is giving me the most amazing strategies and techniques and made adjustments during my fights that have completely turned around the fight in my favor. Just through being able to see the way the fight's developing and where it needs to go, and knowing my capabilities and the other fighters' capabilities, he's been able to point me in a direction that I think a lot of other people who aren't as good as him would ever be able to do. It's amazing that someone from an outside who's not in the ring can give you a bit of advice, and that fight could be going one way and then it can take a complete turn and go the other way. Like that's being a true master of your craft.
And you don't think you've got that?
I believe
results beg to differ, but
I believe for him it just came more naturally. I think that was his gift. He was, in a funny sort of way, he was born to do that. Okay. I believe I had to learn to do it, and I've believed I've gotten better and better and better at it the more I do it. But I don't think I had a natural gift in the same way that he did.
When did you know you had it? When you'd learned it, or what happened? What was the event that, for want of a better word, turned the tide a bit? That led you to learn it in a deep and intense way that has set the platform for where you are now?
No one particular event. Over time, and as the success grew and the record started speaking for itself, there's no substitute for just experience. So as I got more experience and my coaches got more experience and we got better and better at what we did, the results spoke for themselves. We got the results. And to the point we are now, where we're at the highest level of competition in the world, and we have an immaculate record. Where now I believe it's just developed, and not one any particular point, but I believe over time, and especially in the last few years, more so than any other time, I believe we've kind of mastered it. I don't want to say that I've mastered it in the same way as my trainer, Lolo Hemoli, but we might be close to his level of understanding, maybe.
Okay. What was there an event though that, and I've read a bit about you, and I've read a bit about your life, and particularly your training career, and I think particularly about what happened in Tahiti.
Yeah.
Was that the event that led to, and I'll get you to talk further about that rather than me, but was that an event that really changed things or had a massive impact on you, that led you to change things or do things differently, which also has set for the platform for where you are now?
It motivated me to be a lot more diligent and more serious about the impact and my input into the sport and into my athletes. Because at that point I realized that the seriousness, and you become a little bit, when you're in the environment for so long, when you're always fighting, I'm not going to say you become jaded, but you become, you become so used to, going into a fight and coming out of it and having a beer and partying and then training for another 8 weeks and having another fight. You lose your sense of how serious an event it actually is. That actually we're going into a sport where under some circumstances, under the right consequences, you can lose your life. You forget about that when you're in the sport so much. And it was a rude awakening and a reminder to me of how serious a sport this is. And I'm not going to say I was being lackadaisical, but that wasn't at the forefront of my mind. And definitely now it made me step my game up so that now I'm able to look after my fighters and look after their safety a lot better off and take it a lot more seriously than I perhaps used to before that. That's what that's done for me.
Can you talk me through some of the more specific details about what happened at that event?
Yeah, so I mean, basically, I took a very good friend of mine, like a Wilman Rodriguez was his name, and actually this particular fighter of mine had come from Lolohe Moli's gym, so we trained together at the same gym. When I started my gym, after a few years, he asked me if he could come and train with me. This was a guy who started training before me at Lolohe Moli's gym. So when he asked me to do that, I can't remember the circumstances. I believe my gym was closer and it was too hard for him to get the Lolos. But of course, this is a guy that was fighting before I started, and now he was coming and asking me to train him. It was a privilege to me. It was a shock and a privilege, and the weight of that responsibility was heavy, but I took it on. And we had several fights together, and then this opportunity for us to fight in Tahiti came up, and basically I went into the boxing fight, and there was unforeseen complications in his head. So there was something there that was dormant, and he took a blow to the head, and then he unfortunately was not able to recover from that, and he virtually just passed away in my arms in the ring. Yeah, I mean, what do you say about like this? One of the most devastating things that ever happened in my life. and one of the most impactful as well. So,
how did you deal with that? How do you deal with that?
If truth be told, how I dealt with it was I just, you could say negatively, but I at that point, I opted out of the sport, to be honest. I chose to opt out of the sport. You always hear about these tragedies, but you're always so far removed from them, so it never really affects you. You never really think about it in a deep and meaningful way. But because I was so close to the situation, my immediate thought was, wow, if this is a sport that can potentially lead to a tragedy like this, then is there really any point in undergoing and pursuing it?
Despite the fact that the circumstances sometimes are beyond your control. I mean,
I mean, absolutely, yeah. Despite that, I was like, well, we shouldn't be risking this. Like, why are we doing this? If there's a potential for this sort of tragedy to occur, I don't want to be a part of it. Let me move on with my life and do something where I don't have to put up with this. I wouldn't have to put up with this, even if I never do, but potentially that it can always happen.
What brought you back, though? What brought you back into the sport? What turned it around?
That was my coach, the man we've already mentioned several times, Lola Hemwili. So at a certain point, I think people started to figure out that that might be it for me. And then he reached out to me, and a lot of people had reached out to me, but I was pretty adamant of
that you were gone.
That I was gone. That I was adamant in my view. I wasn't wanting to change it. But then, I mean, Lola Hemwili, he's quite an amazing person. Not just an amazing coach, but an amazing person. And he framed it in a way where I was able to see it from the perspective that he was trying to give me. And basically, he said this, like he said, Eugene, your fighters are still going to fight. They're still going to train, they're still going to fight, they're still going to pursue their career. And then he said to me, is there a person on this earth that you trust with their lives more than yourself? And that was an amazing moment. I still remember that, man, because I still get chills right now talking about that moment. Because that was a light bulb moment. That was a pivotal point in my life. Because I knew straight away that there wasn't a single person, and it may seem a little bit selfish and stuff, but I just knew that there wasn't another person out there that I could trust more than myself to look after my guys, because I was so, committed to them. I love my fighters. I'm fully committed to them. All I want to do is look after them and make sure they're safe. And then when he put it to me like that, it was just an epiphany. Like I went from being adamant that I didn't want to be in this sport to completely turning that around and being like, I have to do this. I cannot walk away. And he managed to do that all in one conversation and a couple of sentences. So it was like an amazing, really pivotal point in my life. And it was just a small conversation at Lola's house, I believe, if I remember rightly. It completely changed my mind.
Wow. And, is that still very much a part of your thinking every fight night, every moment before your fighters get into a ring? Is that part of your framework, part of your philosophy that's in your mind going, right, have I got this person to where they need to be, not just to win a fight, which is really important, but also to protect them, to look after them? Have I got them in the right place at the right time in the right way?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a big part of it's a big part of my thought process, and yeah, I feel like I have to be there, and sometimes it's detrimental. I have lucky enough that I have some world-class coaches with me, and I don't necessarily have to fly to Budapest or Romania or London and one day spend 8 hours there and come back. I don't have to do that. They are capable, sometimes more capable than me, but sometimes I feel like I need to be there, I have to be there. And this is when this kind of thing works against you. And so sometimes I overcommit myself and use too much energy in areas I don't have to. But yeah, it's just that sense of obligation, that sense that I need to be there to help them and be safe. Definitely it can work against you a little bit.
But it works for you as well. It works for you as well. I mean, look at the results, and which is why I sometimes think you are being hard on yourself when you also want to fight at the same time because of your approach. I mean, this is your approach to looking after the fighters. That, as you say, you love them, right? You want to look after them.
Yeah, I mean, it's a full commitment. Like when you fight in our team at my gym, it's a proper full-time commitment. And that's why it's kind of daunting for me to fight as well. Because to add other tasks to my already busy level of commitment that I already have to everybody else sometimes seems a little daunting. Yeah. Which is maybe why I haven't gone there yet.
I wonder what it would have been like the first day you met Israel Adesanya, because you seem to be completely different individuals. Maybe, this is just my impression, I don't know him well, but he's, for want of a better word, quite extroverted, you know, crumping and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I think it's fair to say you're not like that.
Yeah.
And he's a different, obviously supremely talented, but a different guy. And you know, you've been in the sport for a while. This guy kind of comes from somewhere, and comes and sees you and says, I want you to train me. And I would have loved to have known how that went down.
I mean, you're right. Like, he's completely different to me. Completely different personality. But you know, in some weird sort of way, I think that's why it works. I think if we were similar, the dynamic would be different, and it wouldn't work as well. But my first meeting with Israel was it didn't go like most people think it would go. Like, I cornered him for a fight. And a friend asked me to help corner him. I didn't know him at the time. And then my first impression of Israel was that fight. And truth be told, like, he got absolutely obliterated in that fight. So, I mean, that's my first impression of him. A guy that came in, had hardly done any training for this fight, so straight away, like, alarm bells are going off. You know, like who goes into such a sport like this and does hardly any training, like, and then he goes into the fight and it shows that he did hardly any training for that fight. So there's nothing there that, you know, I mean, he was a nice, respectful guy and stuff, but, you know, there's nothing extraordinary about the meeting or anything. I shook my hand, and then I knew he lived in Wanganui, and then expected never to see him again. But then a couple months later is when he turned up at the gym and walked in the gym and then said, hey, look, I want to train here. And again, the only impression I've ever had of him was that previous encounter.
So the alarm bells are still going off?
Yes, the alarm bells are still going off, so I'm like, I actually told him that he should check out some other gyms. I said, hey, look, you're welcome to train at this gym, but actually this area of Auckland, there's 5 or 6 gyms in the local area. I said, well, check them out. And I know you've had a little taste of this gym and you've met me and stuff. Check them out. Go and meet those trainers. And then if you still want to come and train here, then you're welcome to come back and train here, pay your fees, and then pay. So I believe
that wasn't you listening to your alarm bells going, might be best to go to.
No, absolutely.
You're like that with all fighters. So you say to fighters that come to you, check out the gyms.
Yeah, I'm pretty open.
Why is that?
Eh?
Why is that?
Well, because I'm just very confident that my gym and the people that I have with me and the trainers are the best at what they do. So you could say maybe it's a little bit of my ego working there, but I know when I send people away, they'll be back. Sure enough, Israel came back and he was like, nah, look, I really want to train here. And then that's when our journey started, when he made that decision to train at my gym then and commit the time and effort, then I reciprocate and I put all the time and effort back into him.
Right. So at that stage, you're not thinking, and perhaps this is your approach with all your ranked fighters, Dan and Alex and all the rest. At no stage were you thinking, this guy's got it, he's going to be world champion. The alarm bells are still going off with all of them, or is at that stage, did you think, I can turn this guy's world championship material here?
Nah. Yeah.
Seriously, nah.
Not from first meeting him. He's a tall, skinny black kid, really. Yeah, dressed kind of like a dork, and yeah. And I didn't really understand him. Like for the first month, we come from such different backgrounds, and we come from such different generations. Like I still don't understand half the things he does. I don't need to understand half the things he does, and there's so many gaps between us, between our cultures, our age, our upbringing. I don't understand a lot about him, but I don't have to. Like, there's a mutual respect between us. And there's a trust, and that is the most important thing that you need between a coach or a trainer and a fighter. So,
what does that mean? Define that for me. There's a trust. I suspect it's the same with all your other fighters as well, with Alex and Dan. And define that, what that means, trust.
Well, essentially what they're doing is, in this sport and our sport, and this is why our sport's so unique, is that what those guys are doing, as opposed to what they're doing for their rugby coach, is when you're committing to your rugby coach, you're committing your effort and your time into them, and they reciprocate by giving you the best strategy and the best game plan to win the game. What we're doing is exactly the same thing, but there's one key difference, is that in a fight, the loser of the fight is the person that's ordinarily taken the most physical damage. And then it becomes, this is where the lines start to get blurred between, whether it's a sport or not. What they're trusting with me is that I can give them a strategy and I can give them the training that they need, where they can perhaps inflict more physical damage on the other person and sustain as little damage as they possibly can within the fight. What that in turn really is safety and well-being. That's what they're trusting me with. they're saying to me that I trust you to get me into this fight and out of it safely, which is massive. Like, that dynamic is not really seen in any other type of sports.
Is that a spoken trust? Is it a verbally communicated trust, or is it just
It's unspoken.
trust built through action?
It's unspoken. You never talk about it.
How do you know you've got it though?
Oh, it's innate, really. It's a feeling. You just have it.
I'm not asking you to trade secrets either.
Yeah,
by
no,
the way.
it's not a trade secret. It's one of those things that's very hard to explain, that I perhaps can't put into words. You just know you have it. You just know you have that mutual respect. You never talk about it, but you just know. You know that person trusts you and trusts you enough to get you into that fight and get you the win and then get you out safely and back to their family. I can't explain how you know you've got it, but you just know it. You just look into each other's eyes and you know it. And trust, this is the big thing. Like, to get trust, you have to know someone well. And the only way to know someone well is you have to have a bond, a friendship with them. How else do you get to know someone so well without being their friend? So a big part of my training philosophy is I have to get to know the person. That person I have to consider, for me to really do the best job that I can possibly do, I have to know them so well enough that I need to be able to call them a very good friend of mine. So, and that's the only way you can gain that level of trust.
It seems almost like it's, I know what you mean by friendship. It sounds like it's even deeper than that. When you take into the safety and well-being perspectives of the sport that you're in, or the sport that your athletes are in, and those that are in your gym, that it seems even more that you mentioned, and I know a lot of people see this as a pejorative word, right? But you mentioned love earlier.
Yeah.
And I think it sounds to me like that's really a central component of it, right? Friendship for a lot of people denotes companionship. That's not what you're doing. Do you know what I mean? I'm not trying to overcomplicate it, but it seems like it's deeper than friendship. It's
a difficult one because love seems like the next best appropriate word, because friendship is not good enough to describe the bond. For want of a better descriptive word, like love is the best thing we've got. So it is definitely a lot deeper bond than just a friendship, and it's a bond you only get through knowing these guys for years, having walked in their shoes, and having experienced all the hardships and obstacles that they've been through side by side with them. And having had some of those experiences myself, you create this special bond and a special understanding that you have between you and your fighter. And I think, and it isn't everybody's opinion, but I think you need that bond to do the best job that I can possibly do, to optimize the job that I can do. I need that kind of bond. That's just part of my philosophy when it comes to training people.
I think the other really significant thing about you is, and again, I'll get you to tell the story, but because we talked about Tahiti and what happened in Tahiti.
Yeah.
But you took Israel's belt. I think when he got the belt, one of the first things that you did was you took the belt back to Tahiti, which talks a lot about you and the importance of what's happened, impacts in your life and what makes you what you are, that it's important to keep your sense of you, which for me is what you did when you took that belt back. And I could be wrong, but that's just what strikes me when I hear you talking the way that you're talking to me now.
I did that. This is why I did that. I felt that, and I'm not a religious person, and I'm not a particularly spiritual person, but I felt that when I wanted to leave the sport and Pupil came to me and spoke those words that almost instantaneously changed my mind. I felt in a strange sort of a way that my fighter that passed away, Willman, had a big part in that moment. And I had this feeling that I believed that he would have never wanted me to step away from the sport. And so for us to get that belt, if you trace it back, a part of that is me changing my mind and making that decision to carry on with this journey and continue on with Israel. That was so if we come down to that one particular moment, and I believe he had something to do with, I believe that because of all the circumstances that eventually happened, and when you go through it, that a part of that belt belonged to him. A part of our success, if you like, was a part of him helping me and Israel out. I'm trying not to sound a little bit like spooky and strange, but I believed I had to pay homage to him. I believe he was a big part in the success in our journey to get there. And I believe that a small part of that belt belonged to him, which is why I took it there, just paying homage to him. But it wasn't just for him, it was for myself as well. It was for myself and for my guys and for my people. Yeah, that's why I did it.
I understand. I struggle with the way the world of UFC is. Yeah. The millions of dollars in this sport. The glitz and the glamour and the cameras and the 50,000 people that go to the event and the millions across the world that watch these events. And there you are, doing what you do, doing it really well, one of the best in the world at what you do. And you haven't lost your sense of self. You know, the way that you've described what you were like as a young kid, get out what you put in, all that kind of thing. What you just talked about, that you've retained your sense of self. And I wonder if that becomes a struggle when you're dealing with the glitz of UFC and talking to Joe Rogan, who apparently has the second best podcast in the world. How do you do that?
To answer your question, I don't struggle at all.
Really?
No. I just know that I just have to be myself. In this podcast and any interviews I do in front of, in front of 30,000 people, 50,000 people, 65,000 people in Melbourne, all I have to do is be myself. And I'm very comfortable doing that. And then if I be myself, I'm comfortable knowing that if you accept me for who I am or you don't, then that's cool. And I'm very comfortable with that. You don't have to like me or accept me, and if you do, then I'm very comfortable with that as well. It doesn't really, it doesn't really make too much of a difference in my head as long as I be myself and be truthful. When it comes to these sort of things, interviews and portraying myself, I just be honest and I just be truthful. And I think the reason I'm like that has got a big part to do with my parents and my upbringing. But I also think it's got a lot to do with my culture as well. And I'm not just talking about my Samoan and my Dutch heritage, but I'm also talking about Kiwi culture. I feel that Kiwis and I've traveled the world, I've been to so many countries, and the furthest places that that people wouldn't even know fighting takes you. I feel that Kiwis are one of the most well-grounded people I've ever met. We never let success and fame and these sort of things get to our head. We're always very good at bringing things back home and remembering where we've come from. And I believe that's a big part of our culture, and I believe I've taken that on board. So that's why I find it very easy to deal with these things and not let them get to me, not start to think that I'm too big for my britches. You know, I'm from Massey, West Auckland. It's where my mum still lives in the same family home. And my culture just constantly reminds me of who I really am. When I start to maybe think that I'm a little bit bigger than I am. I'm just a local kid from the local high school down the road in Massey.
Does it help knowing that your sister's one of the 10 most important people in world sport, apparently? Is it Sarai, who's the chief of the women's football game for FIFA, right? I've stuffed up the title, but effectively she runs the women's game in FIFA, and apparently in 2019 she was noted as one of the 10 most influential people in sport, which probably pegs you down a couple of spaces.
I mean, me and my sister are very competitive.
Really?
Yeah. So.
Wow.
So, but I mean, to that end, I can't compete with her at all. Like, yeah, she's a very important person. I managed to get a small opportunity out. I went to a fight in Europe. I scooted across to Switzerland, where she lives, where the FIFA head office is, and what an amazing multi-billion-dollar company that she's essentially, you know, one of the top 3 or 4 in charge of the whole thing. You know, one Christmas she came home and started complaining to me about traveling, and I was like, you know, what are you complaining about? You can't do as much traveling as me. And then she did, and then we were going through our schedules and stuff. Where have you been this year? What have you been doing? We were comparing them. And then it ended up being that she does a tremendous amount of trouble. But then as we got deeper into the conversation, I figured out that she flies business everywhere. And then I also figured out that sometimes she takes a private jet. And then I was like, you understand that I'm flying economy 90% of the time. You understand that, right? And she's reached the point where she can't even fly economy anymore. She's like, I can't fly economy anymore. So we very different types of travel. So yeah, she beats me on that.
Well, but she doesn't have, 2 world-class athletes, champion athletes in her stable either.
No, we're very supportive of each other. It's
despite the competition.
Yeah, it's a friendly competition. Yeah.
Look, Eugene, thank you so much for this conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being on our podcast. We'll ask your sister to come on the podcast one day.
Yeah, I think
she's
a fascinating story. She took the complete different path to what I took in life. Yeah, I mean, she worked her ass off. She ended up living in Samoa and built her little empire back in the land where my grandparents are from. So yeah, and I stayed here and built my empire here. So fascinating story.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get her to drop some secrets about her big brother too.
Yeah.
Eugene, thank you very much.
No problem.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Excellent. Thank you.